Welcome to today's webinar, which is about is a prequel for a solar PV trade mission Central America and Colombia that will take place from 16 to 20 November in Bogota and Panama City. In the coming hour, we will learn a lot more about the market status and potential of solar in Colombia, which could well become the surprise market of LATAM in 2015. My name is Tom van Dorp. I'm working at Solarplaza since 2010 and currently responsible for the event in November. I'll be moderating this session, and in a minute I will give you a short introduction of our company Solarplaza and our upcoming events. First, I want to give you a quick idea about the agenda of today. Our keynote speaker is John Padilla from IPD Latin America. He's a key partner and sponsor of our event, and he will share his vision on Colombia's energy sector and regulatory framework. Thereafter, we have a presentation of another important local partner, which is Mark Tremel from Colombia Invest. He will share his perspective on the solar opportunities per segment. He will be doing this jointly with Alberto Moreta from IBC Solar, who is working on several projects already in Colombia. And Alberto will share briefly some lessons learned while entering Colombia as an international company. The last speaker of today is Ignacio Fernandez Stearns from the Inter-American Development Bank. He will briefly share his light on the opportunities to finance solar in Colombia as of today. We end the session with Q&A. The session is expected to come to an end in about 1 hour. Some practical notes. The presentation will be made available afterwards. You will receive an email. You can ask questions at any point throughout the webinar via the chat box. There will be time for questions after every speech. In the panel discussion at the end, we will address further questions. We have a lot of attendees in the session at the moment, so we may not be able to address all questions, but any unanswered questions can be directed to the speakers directly. If you have any technical problems, don't hesitate to drop us an issue in the chat box. There is a technical support desk available who will try to help you solve the problems immediately. To give you an idea who is with you in this virtual conference room, over 200 attendees are registered, and they're from all over the world. A lot from the Americans, of course, but also a lot of interest from Europe. So that's a very mixed audience. Just a little bit of background on Solarplaza. I assume you all know us, but very briefly, we're founded in 2004. We're focused on we're a focused global international platform for solar PV, and our mission is displayed on your screen. We've done over 70 conferences and trade missions around the world in the past 10 years, and well, you can see our track record on this map. It's been really over all the world. A common question is, what are the big benefits of joining a trade mission? Why a trade mission? Most people know it from government-organized events, but we don't do it like that. Based on our past events, we've become huge believers in the value of taking a group of international business-minded people to get a hands-on, in-the-field, no-nonsense taste of potentially interesting market like Colombia. We've defined 5 key arguments for people to join a trade mission like this. First of all, you get a real feel of the country. You get to meet the local experts, key stakeholders and decision makers face-to-face in dedicated meetings on the offices of those stakeholders. You will, through that, learn all there is to know about the solar market at the source. And highly important, you'll connect with the local industry, especially through the 2-day conference that's included in the trade mission. And people often underestimate the value of a group with the group with whom you're traveling the whole week. Don't forget, it's not only about who you're visiting and meeting with, but also who you are traveling with. Like-minded professionals that are looking to start and expand their business in the same market as you are. Yeah, so this slide displays the participants of last year's trade mission, just to give you an impression. The event was also included by a 2-day conference, of which over 140 people attended, most of them from the region, over 60%, and you see that it was a high-level crowd. Some testimonials you can look up later. I think it will give you some idea about how a trade mission has been valued. And I will quickly run through the program of this year. Of course, a more detailed program is available on the website, and we will keep that updating in the coming weeks. I will be in Panama and Colombia during the coming 2 weeks to meet a lot of companies and institutions and to secure most of the meetings, so keep an eye on that. Things will be filled very quickly. Feel free to contact me anyway to schedule a call to discuss involvement or if you have any suggestions. But just to give you a quick insight into the program, the first day will be focused on as an introductory evening on doing business, the regulatory framework, understanding what the challenges and opportunities of solar in Colombia are. The second day we will be focusing on meetings with institutions like the ministry, like the couple of utilities, regulatory authority, and more. In the afternoon, we have a more dedicated business-focused workshop on project development and financing in Colombia. A lot of bankers and investors will be involved here, and also local solar companies. On the third day, we fly to Panama, where we have one meeting on Panama specifically and a workshop on financing solar in Central America. And last but not least, we have a 2-day conference on the future of solar in Central America and Colombia, which will be attended by over 200 participants, of which a majority is regional companies. There is space for exhibitors there, so if you're interested, let us know. Also, if you have suggestions for the program, always welcome. Again, feel free to contact me. These are the details on which you can reach me, and have a look at the website, I would say. And I'm going to announce the first speaker. One thing before that, soon we will publish more content as well that might help you in elaborating, understanding better what's going on in the region. There will be facts and figures per country that we're addressing, and also top 25 of projects will be out soon. And yeah, let me announce the first speaker of today, which is John Padilla. He is Managing Director of IPD Latin America. He's a renowned consultant in the field of energy in the Americas, good friend of the company, and he was the best valued speaker in the last edition of Solarplaza event in Mexico. And today, John is going to speak on Colombia's energy sector and the regulatory framework. John, welcome today. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Welcome. I'm going to ask you to share your screen so you can open your presentation. And yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning. Thank you very much, or good afternoon, as the case may be. It looks like we have people from several different parts of the world, so that's fantastic. I'm just grabbing my presentation right now. I'm going to look to cover a couple of different items.
John, did you accept the invitation to share your screen? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. Just opening it up right now. Sorry about that.
Perfect. No worries. Yep, okay. Now we can see your screen. Thank you. Go ahead.
Fantastic. So, given the fact that a number of people have probably not spent a tremendous amount of time taking a look at Colombia, I thought that I would start out looking at an overview of the electricity sector here to kind of provide an overview, and then take a look specifically at what I think has probably brought a lot of people to the webinar, which is the 2014 laws that were passed and the secondary laws that are about to be signed. So kind of with that in mind, I'm just going to start out with a little bit of an overview of the electricity sector in Colombia as it stands today. What you immediately find is that the demand for electricity is essentially highly concentrated, and it's concentrated in about 8 different regions. The 5 largest regions of which constitute in excess of 80%, 81% of total demand. So the country has a number of non-connected areas, but the population and the demand, at least as it stands right now, is small. There are people, and I think there may be some discussion a little bit later in the webinar about some of that potential in what is called the non-interconnected areas, the ZNIs. But what you can see is that Colombia is the 6th largest power generator by capacity in Latin America, and so the non-interconnected areas, the ZNIs, constitute just a little bit over 1% of total capacity today. Just like other Latin American countries, or South American countries specifically, I should say, Colombia is heavily hydro dependent. And so that works fantastically when there's lots of rain, but when you have El Nino, that starts to be a problem. And it's one of the items that we'll talk about as it relates to renewables, because it does provide a certain level of advantage and will be an incentive kind of going forward for renewables. On the ZNIs, what you also find is that there's just intermittent service. So this is an issue that is something that the country is going to have to address, and it's something in general that continues to kind of come up when we're talking about integration, particularly post-conflict, something that I'll talk about as we move forward. So I wanted to then just kind of provide an overview of how the system is broken out. So as per the 1994 reform, the system was broken into generation, transmission, and distribution. There was grandfathering at that time, and so as you can see, EPM or EPM was actually allowed to maintain its positions in generation, transmission, and distribution. But you essentially have 4 to 6 players in each one of these areas, and this just kind of gives you an idea of how the system is broken out. When we this then becomes really an important component in terms of how renewables would compete, and so we wanted to give just a little overview of how electricity tariffs are set. So the final tariff, you see the formula up there on top of the screen. I think my pointer here will show it here. And then you can see that this is the generation component that's included in the tariff, and these are the other items that are included for the final piece. So G is generation, and then you have transmission, distribution, you have line losses, etc. We also included just the average residential rate in the continental U.S. just as a proxy. But what you see here for a hydro market, I mean, this looks incredibly attractive in terms of competing. The way that you would compete is you're going to compete on the G, so on generation, particularly for self-consumption, and or in the fence type of projects, and then you would compete for the final tariff if you're going to sell into the grid. That's the way that's set up. The other thing to take note of in the Colombian market is that there's cross subsidies at the residential level. So there's 6 stratuses that exist in any of the urban populations, and if you're in the lower 3, you receive subsidies of rates, and then if you're in the higher stratuses, you essentially pay additional amounts. As you can see there, it's not a complete trade-off, and so there is a net subsidy that the government has to pay. And so what you can see is that there's about $275 million of differential, but then when you include all of the other components, it adds up to about $500 million. On the Z&I front, it adds about another $75 million of subsidies. It's heavily dependent on diesel, and we'll take a look at diesel costs because, as you can imagine, they're much higher than what you have through the rest of the grid. When you add that all up, it adds up to about 580 million US, and that represents about 65% of the budget. The reason I mention all of this is because it's important just to kind of put in context why it is that the government is not really interested in providing direct subsidies to renewables. So when we take a look at how the law has been set up and why they're doing what they're doing, this is very much a can they secure renewable energy without essentially providing direct subsidies. All right, so when we take a look at the installed capacity, as I mentioned, 70% comes from hydro. You have gas-fired capacity, which is 11% right now. I would say that, in our view, we'll see potentially a rising amount of natural gas fired plants, just as there's going to be a need to provide a home for increased amounts of natural gas from a whole host of sources, which I won't get into as a discussion point unless people really want to kind of explore that. But what you can see is that you have less than 1% in renewable energy at this point And the main factors for limited renewables at this point is, again, the abundant water resources. I mean, Colombia has world-class amounts of rain and water. And then the other issue really becomes reliability. So that's going to be one of the factors that that will be important to take a look at as the market continues to develop and how it's addressed within the new laws that move forward. And then I think the other item that's really important to keep in mind is that there's just really a limited amount of market knowledge here on renewables. And so, you know, like most things, what you don't know, you usually fight. You know, there certainly are detractors to it, and I think that there's an educational process that absolutely needs to take place, and that needs to come from multilaterals, from developers and other interested parties to really kind of continue to help educate market participants here in Colombia. So I just wanted to briefly take a look at how the dispatch model looks in Colombia, and if you take a look on the right-hand side, you can see the average price by technology. So the gray in the background is the spot price, and what you can see below that is coal, and then hydro is the blue. And not surprisingly, this was a weather-related incident that you had here in May, and you can see that the spot price, given the fact that you had 70% dependence on hydro, spiked along with it. So gas, as I said, is the other component that you see in this mix, and I think that will be one item that renewable developers will certainly have to take into consideration and analyze very well as there's growing potential for gas in the country. Okay, so what I wanted to do here was just kind of take a look at within renewables installed capacity, what you really have. You have one major wind project, which is Hepirachi, which is up in La Guajira, and that constitutes the full nearly 20 megawatts of power that you have in the system. As you can see right here, the solar is incredibly small at this point, and most of the capacity of renewables has really been focused on mini hydro, and this has been incredibly successful. The folks that have developed a lot of these mini hydro plants have had significant success. You also have a decent amount of biomass projects that have been in there. What has happened, or how solar has essentially been developed into the mix is that you have telecommunication towers. So these are in fairly remote areas as well, and that's been the principal usage of solar today. From a kind of macro perspective on Colombia, what you can see is that irradiance, good quality irradiance you find in two areas. So you find it up here in the Caribbean, and then you also find it here along the border with Venezuela. This is a very complicated conflict area, and that will be quite difficult, I think, probably to pursue, and where the main area of interest and focus will be certainly up here in the north. So Cartagena, Barranquilla, these will be the main areas, and then power that could potentially touch into Antioquia, the Department of Antioquia. But you can see down here essentially where La Guajira kind of stacks up against other market participants or other parts of the world that have good irradiance. Okay, very quickly, what I wanted to take a look at here was just some of the pros and cons. And one of the things to kind of keep in mind that's not necessarily very well understood is just one of the positives is the counter-seasonal cycle. So given the fact that Colombia is so hydro-dependent, when you do have El Nino, and El Nino is coming again, you typically then have a lot less rain, and you have hotter and drier seasons. So that actually bodes very, very well for solar, and I think that that will be a positive aspect that can certainly be kind of exploited. The other thing that we continue to see, and which I'm sure most people know much better than I do, is just the rapidly decreasing technology prices that we're seeing in the market. And so as those continue to evolve, the competitiveness is something that will be readily notable. And I think that's part of the education process that people that have not been following solar developments need to be educated on. So I think that's a key area. There's also potential viability for some residential and commercial use, particularly the residential users in those upper stratuses. So the question is where that will be. Bogota probably won't be the place, but if you take a look up in Medellin, Cartagena, Barranquilla, that could certainly be the case. I think the other the detractors, let's put it that way, are really that incentives. The question is are they going to be broad enough for the levels of broad levels of activity? There will always be select, isolated opportunity sets, but for broad and large scale development, I mean that's going to be one of the big questions. And there's just been really kind of slow regulation development progress as we'll take a look at a timeline. And the question right now is there really enough kind of political will? There's been a lot of talk, but the question is are they as serious about it in getting it done and making sure that you actually develop a viable market? Licensing and social issues and security in Colombia are absolutely essential, and they're increasingly complicated. We see it on the oil and gas side as well as the mining side, and so that's going to be something that folks that are looking to develop projects are going to need to spend some very significant time and make sure that they're doing their homework up front. I think the last item that I would point out, and it's just kind of a reiteration, is simply that large-scale solar projects are still considered to be unprofitable unless they're in the ZNIs. And a lot of that is going to depend, once again, on if you can compete for G, for the generation cost, and then whether you're able to compete for the final tariff. And so that proves itself out very, very well in just one quick case study that I put here. Mark is going to cover, I think, some other case studies, but the Éxito Panorama is an interesting one. It's the largest solar plant that's been built to date in Colombia, up in Barranquilla. And so Grupo Éxito is a retail group here in Colombia. It is a subsidiary of Grupo Casino out of Europe, and Green Yellow is a developer. It's also owned by the Grupo Casino. The only thing that I wanted to really kind of focus on here is what you see is that this is the facility of the project, and this, or the facility of Grupo Éxito there in Barranquilla. And what you see is that they only actually installed solar panels on half of the building, and that was basically because it's for self-consumption. So they were able to compete on the G level, but to sell excess capacity into the market, when you added in all the other components, it wasn't competitive. So this is a very kind of clear case study of some of the challenges that you run into right now. So what I wanted to kind of wrap up with is really policy and regulation and kind of where we stand right now. So turning to renewables, I think there's some takeaways that I wanted to quickly kind of focus on. And what you see is that EDAM, which is the Hydrology, Meteorology, and Atmospheric Studies Institute, has projected less rain perception for 2011-2040. Now, there are people that argue that that may or may not be true, and whether that's going to take place, etc. But I think the point is that that is an official source. It's absolutely what the government utilizes as a base, and so that becomes an important kind of component. We've already talked about El Nino, and then in terms of system reliability, the other item that is certainly important to understand is just there's increasing social and environmental licensing challenges for the large-scale hydro. So the chances that we'll see additional large-scale hydro generation is very, very unlikely. So that bodes well, certainly, for renewables, as does the need for a diversified energy basket. Anybody that has spent any time looking at Latin America or South America specifically knows that most of these countries are all super hydro dependent, and so it works fantastic. People become very complacent about it when there's lots of water, but when you have El Nino, it becomes a big, big problem. And then when we take a look at the ZNIs, I think that's an important component. It certainly becomes an important component in a post-conflict scenario. So as if there is an agreement that is reached between the FARC and the Colombian government, how are you going to develop a lot of those areas? And then there's certainly a need to reduce diesel use, and if you can reduce the fiscal burden, I think that's going to be a big win-win, and you'll certainly get the attention of the government. I think the ZNIs are going to be a key area where the multilaterals can play a very, very big role, and perhaps Ignacio can talk a little bit about that later in the webinar. And then it's just also just providing more continual service in these areas. So it's a big economics, socioeconomic component of how renewables can play in the non-interconnected areas. On the political front, I think what's important to kind of keep in mind is that Colombia has been it's been coming out, so to speak, to the international community, and so it has shown a new face. It is absolutely trying to be much more involved on an international level. So it's signed international agreements. It's applying for OECD membership. And so renewables becomes, I would say, from a very peripheral view, is in that scheme of clean energy and being a good global citizen. I think the issue becomes whether they're looking to put the pieces in place that are going to make a viable market, as I mentioned before. We don't see a major priority within Congress on the issue, and there's not really a clear political champion apart from the UPME. And then you also just have detractors. Not all stakeholders are necessarily interested in seeing renewables succeed. So just taking a look at where we've come from and where we're going in terms of renewables from a legal and regulatory perspective. What you see is that starting in 2001, there was a law that was passed that was fairly broad, and it just was dealing with efficient energy use. So it declared renewable energy as a policy priority, but all of the next steps were certainly left out. So what you have then in 2003 was what is called the PRUERE, and that was just an indicative plan for rational use of energy and non-conventional energy sources, so essentially renewables. Not until 2008 did you see cogenerators allowed to sell their excess supply of energy, so that becomes an important component, particularly for renewables, if you're going to be able to sell into the grid. And then in 2010, we actually saw the action plan for 2010-2015 put in place. So what grabbed the international market's attention was certainly last year in May of 2014 with the renewables law, which I'll go into in detail in just a couple of minutes. And then what we have is regulation for self-generators that was put forward in March. And now what we're waiting on is essentially the secondary laws or the regulations that will govern the incentives related to the renewables law of May 2014. So this is kind of a schematic of the 2014 law that was passed. There's really kind of three components that are most important. The others were really kind of reiterations of many of the things that have already been put in place. So the first and foremost item is with respect to incentives. And so the incentives are spelled out in the law itself, and they include income tax reductions, VAT exemptions, tariff exemptions, and then other accounting incentives. And the other component that's important was the authorization to sell the surplus. So that was just another reaffirmation of what I showed here previously through the 2008 law. The last item, which is essentially the desire to replace diesel in the ZNIs, and those are that becomes a bigger policy priority, if you will. So just as a last slide here, this is where we stand today. The draft regulation was published on April 16th, and they gave people essentially 8 days to provide comments. And we broke down kind of the comments into three main areas. The first really kind of deals with what I would just call bureaucracy and highly complex processes. So the concern is that everything has to be registered and technically approved by the UBME, and then it has to be certified by the Ministry of Environment. The way that this is all kind of structured, it's concerned a lot of people that it's just going to be incredibly time intensive and will be complicated. The second item is with respect to income tax reduction, and specifically in the draft version, it stated that that you were not going to be able to combine income tax reduction with any other tax or other fiscal related incentives. That runs counter to what the law says, and the way that Colombian law is set up, the regulations can't supersede the law itself. So this may have just been a drafting error, but it certainly caught the attention of individuals, but hopefully that will be rectified and clarified when the final regulation comes out. And lastly, the other concern that a lot of people had was with respect to VAT reduction eligibility. And so the way that it was set up is that you needed specific approval on a almost piece by piece type of setup. People saw that as too complex, and that the expectation now is that a standardized list will emerge. What we have learned is that the final regulation in its final form now sits on the desks of both the Minister of Mines and Energy as well as the Presidency. The Ministry of Finance will also have to certainly sign off on that, but all indications are that this is now a done deal and will be coming out shortly. The details of how some of these items will be addressed are not completely clear. What we do believe is that there will be a standardized list, and they'll hopefully address some of the bureaucratic issues that are included in the way that this was drafted. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for this great overview of where we came from and where we're hopefully going towards. It seems like a positive development. I have one question from the audience for you, John. That is a question on, that's the following question. I'd like to know if there is some kind of restriction to sign private PPAs with off-takers, depending on the plant size. Is that the case?
No, you can certainly go sign a PPA. The big issue is whether you are looking to sell your excess capacity into the marketplace, and so then that becomes probably the bigger challenge. So if it's in the fence type of projects, then you don't really run an issue on that front, and that follows off of the comments that I showed just in that timeline in terms of the ability to sell excess power, etc.
So there is no 20 megawatt cap, and above that cap you have to sell on marginal price at the spot market. That's not the case?
I'm sorry?
This person read about a 20 megawatt cap on private PPAs, and above that level you have to sell directly at marginal prices to the spot markets. But that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't give you a specific answer on that. I mean, you know, our analysis is focused principally much more on kind of the macro, et cetera, but we haven't gotten into that level of detail where I could articulate a clear answer on that.
No worries. Okay, thanks a lot, John, again for your presentation. We're going to continue to the next presenter, which is Mark Tremel. Mark is the CEO at Colombia Invest. He is most likely Colombia's most experienced solar expert, with a background in Europe at companies like Suntech and Satcom. He's important boots on the ground for Solarplaza activities in Colombia as a partner, and today is going to speak on the perspective of a local solar company and the business case in different segments. Mark, good afternoon, good morning for you. You're with us? Mark, do you hear me?
Okay, I'm sorry, here we are. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I just had a silence here on. So let me just share my screen.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, maybe quickly after Mark, it will be directly Alberto Moreta. Alberto is working for IBC Solar. It's one of the first companies that have entered Colombia already, international companies. He's a friend of the company, and I guess I can call him an ambassador of our trade missions as well. He will be involved again this year, and today he's going to share his perspective shortly on being an international company entering Colombia. But first, a word to Mark. Here you go.
All right. Thanks a lot again, and a very warm welcome, good morning, or good afternoon to the European side. So from our perspective, Colombia Invest is a local Colombian-German company. We're now here since end of 2013. Our market coverage is certainly the national market, Colombia, but also what is Panama and parts of the Caribbean. My background, as Tom mentioned, is I did work for Suntec Power. I also worked for Satcon, the Siemens PV inverters, and I started actually with IBC Solar. On our local markets, we work with strong partnerships when it comes to construction and also to energy services. Our focus is almost 80% on solar PV, but there are also certain solar thermal projects that are coming up, and we also work very strongly in the agricultural sector with solar drying for fruits and coffee. So with whom we get in touch, we both work with the private sector and the public sector. The private sector mainly with the industrial, commercial, and also end customer segment, but let's say mainly it's going to be the industrial and the commercial sector, where we find a lot of manufacturing, telecommunication, transport companies, logistics companies, and then on the commercial sectors, tourism sector, supermarkets, and other facilities, as well as end customer segment, where we also get interest from end customers interested in the technology. On the public sector, we strongly work with the government, a governmental institution like the IPSE, that's the institution directly from the Ministry for non-interconnected areas. We also work with the UPME. We are strongly involved with the 1715 regulation, putting our comments into the market, and we also work, let's say, with universities and schools on the educational sector. One of our references we've done this year is the Grupo Energía de Bogotá. This is part of the Empresa de Energía Bogotá, as John already mentioned before. Their main business is the electricity and gas transport market. They own major shares of Codensa, which is the local energy supplier for Bogotá. They own parts in Peru, Guatemala, and also Brazil. So we've installed there 56 PV panels of 330 watts BenQ with 2 inverters, and the system has been provided by IBC Solar, not only the system, also the engineering and the supervision. Looking a little bit about the market overview, John already mentioned a little bit this map, just to focus on, we are based in Bogotá. Bogotá and surroundings has around 1,550 kilowatt hours per square meter per year, which I marked in my map with a blue sun. So that's, let's say, that's more or less, that's the irradiation that we use as a base. From there, we go a step further to the coffee zone, let's say where you have a strong growth of coffee, so you already have significant more irradiation of about 2,800, and then up north you see the coastal area of about 2,100 square meter kilowatt hours per square meter. Biggest project in Colombia so far realized. Ours is not the biggest, but it's certainly one of the references. So John already mentioned the Éxito Barranquilla with about 500 kilowatts. We've seen 2 projects in Cali, one with 150 kilowatts and another with 73 kilowatts. And we've also seen another project with 100 kilowatts in Barranquilla, so up north at the coastal area, all for self-consumption. It's also important to mention the rural electrification of Tito Mate, which has been a project very far in a broad area in the Chocó. Market opportunities, what we certainly see, there are 3 of them to mention. That's one, the self-consumption, where only few commercial and industrial companies have detected solar PV as a real option of self-consumption. We do see opportunities not on the short term, but on the long term as well for to a certain amount for big solar PV power plants, because the energy uncertainty that John already mentioned. And looking on the right side, you will see the map of the non-interconnected zones, which is only about 2% of the population, but it's about 50% of the surface of Colombia. So there is a certain need to put energy into these zones where typically we find either diesel power plants or nothing. So looking about some business cases on this perspective, first of all, it's very important to understand the expectations from the customers. Our customers, so far, what we've met, they expect a return on invest between 5 and maximum 8 years for the investment like self-consumption. Investments are rarely done on a long-term perspective. So if we talk about investments for more than 10 years, the perception has not arrived yet. Energy savings that should be done with a self-consumption PV power plant, they have to be significant, at least between 25 and 50%, which is not always easy if you do not have a law in place that allows us to get a net metering or a surplus of energy. One very important point is, as the technology is pretty new to the local market, we need to work, first of all, with pilot projects because we need to get trust into this technology. And a last and a very important point is the warranty perception for 25 years still needs to be proven on a local customer base. So what we've done here, talking about business cases, we've done 3 business cases. The first of all is a typical self-consumption business case. So we took one of the industrial customers that we've been working on in Armenia, in the coffee zone. We say, first of all, we cannot so far apply any tax reduction of the law 1715. We took the irradiation of about 1875 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. As a consumption, we took a base load of 100 kilowatts. That's, let's say, base load between weekends, holidays, and a peak load of 180 kilowatts. We say the production runs between Monday to Saturday, and we took an energy price of 363 pesos colombianos, which would be 13.7 cents, dollar cents. So let's say the customer would decide to implement today a 75 kilowatt power plant, which with a total cost of about 150,000 US dollars, 125,500 US dollars, which would be roughly 20% of self-consumption. So you see, with a return on invest of about 8 years and an IRR about 13 years over 25 years. The conclusion is, well, we are on the limit of 8 years is already quite long, but could be doable if the customer is certainly willing to implement this green technology. Now on the right side, we see if we, in case we would apply today the law 1715 on the income tax, let's say the customer paid last year for 55,000 US dollars in income tax, you would get a return on invest of 5 years only. So this would be a reduction of 3 years, which is absolutely significant. So typically our expectation and experience is once we will have the law, self-consumption plants will be much more interested. The same we did for bigger solar PV power plant. As John already mentioned, the northern part of Colombia, the Guajira, has a very good irradiation. We took, for example, a rural zone north of Valledupar with an irradiation of 2,280 kilowatt hours per square meter. We said we would sign, for example, a PPA for 15 years with a PPA energy price of 190 pesos colombianos, which would be 7.2 dollar cents. A 5 megawatt power plant with roughly estimated cost of 6.9 million US dollars. And what we see is the return on invest is 11 years, IRR 4.8%, and we do not see it viable so far without law and without further incentives. And the last business case, what we've done is a PV diesel system in the Amazonas region. irradiation is less over there, especially because it's raining a lot almost every day. There's an existing diesel generation of 300 kVA with a 24 hours power supply. The main intention is to reduce the diesel consumption during the daytime. We took a very conservative energy generation price without subsidies of 950 pesos. Can certainly be much higher because major costs are transport prices. Transport prices to the region are very high. So let's say we implement a 280 kilowatt PV power plant, which has a higher cost, mainly due to the components involved, due to the technical components we need for the power plant, as well as the transport cost to the region. But we still get an ROI of 5 years and an IRR of 21%. So that would be also absolutely viable without incentives from the law of 1715. One slide about what's really influencing a lot here is on the local market. So as you see, this is a graph. So that's a graph about the dollar. You see the dollar has been changing about 30%, rising towards the local currency. So basically what our customer today pays in a local currency is very high. So we expect that this will be a major driver once the dollar will be a little bit weaker towards the Colombian peso. We also expect the law 1715 to reduce us between 30 and 50% payback time, which is absolutely important. The grid interconnection and distribution cost of energy will be is currently a huge issue, but it will be much better because there's an investment plan for the next couple of years. And as mentioned already, the overland transport prices has to be lower in the upcoming years. There are new on the chat.
Mark, it seems that Mark,
yes.
The connection is a little less at the moment. Can you try to speak again? Mark, I'm losing you at the moment. So in case it doesn't work in the coming minute, I suggest to first go to Ignacio and have him present. I don't hear you anymore. So
not at all. Not at all.
Now I hear you again. Mark.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead.
Let me just finish the last slide. It's about challenges on the market. As mentioned, there's huge uncertainty about the law, and as John already mentioned, I mean, the last issue stated that maybe only one of the 4 proposed incentives can be used. So this gives an absolutely unclear situation currently. There are also market rumors about a possible PV subsidy for huge power plants to overcome the upcoming energy crisis caused by El Nino. We don't know if this might happen or this might not happen, but there are rumors on the market. It would be certainly interesting to get that. And a very difficult challenge on the local market are finance rates. They are way too high. Few banks are specialized on green energy financing and energy financing of projects. The pricing of the system, what we found, is also typically quite high. So if you see 2,200 or 2,600 US dollars per kilowatt installed, which is not what we offer and not what we can offer in the local market. So what we already seen with customers that have been attacked or have been caught by our competitors, the first thing I say that solar is not attractive to us because we already know the cost. And if you then analyze the costs are not competitive to what you offer on an international base. So pretty much wrapping up, there are still a lot of challenges, but we see much more opportunities. And finally, I really hope we see each other in November. We're going to be here, and thanks a lot. So I'm switching over to Alberto, who's going to present us a little bit
about...
Thank you very
much, Mark. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Tom, it's okay?
I can hear you, yes. Can you
Yeah,
click on the
okay.
presentation once, just to make sure, because I see part of your screen. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
it's
go
okay.
ahead.
Okay, hello everybody. Good morning from Colombia. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tom and Solarplaza for hosting us today. So very briefly, because we have only 5 minutes left, I'm going to introduce you IBC Solar. And I don't want to repeat all what my colleagues have explained in their presentation very well. Both John and Mark have given us a lot of figures and details, and I guess Ignacio is also going to show us a lot of information and figures. So from my point of view, yeah.
Can I disturb you very quickly? Can you click on the red button at the top left of your webinar screen? You see that small, exactly, perfect, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's okay now? Tom, it's okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead. So about IBC Solar, we are an international company, a German-based company, and the main four points for us is the successful. The company was founded in 1982, so we are 33 years old company, only doing PV business. Since the foundation, we are owner-managed company, and one of our main strengths nowadays is the financial stability. The other main point is the premium products. We are very conscious on quality, and we are long-term agreements with the main manufacturers in the PV sector. And nowadays, since 10 years, 12 years ago, really, we are an international company doing business worldwide. So very briefly, the main facts and figures: we have 33 years of experience, 2.9 gigawatt hours worldwide installed, 150,000 systems worldwide, 250 employees in 9 countries, 8 of them international subsidiaries. This is the map where we are based and where we are working nowadays. You can see we are spread in the main countries where PV is being developed. In Latin American area, we are from Mexico to Chile, in all Central America and Caribbean area, of course in Colombia and Brazil. As I said, we are a company only doing PV since we were founded. So nowadays we can provide global solutions in PV, from the home solutions through the power plant solutions, business solution, and off-grid and hybrid solutions. Okay, and in the left side you can see all the different things that we can do with PV. And we have mainly 4 business lines, business units, okay, distribution, large-scale projects, independent power supplies, and development and investing in large-scale projects. In distribution business, we are able to supply all services and products that are needed for a PV project. This is the main products on our portfolio. And in project business as well, we can provide all the things that are needed for developing a project, a large scale project. These are the scope that we usually have in a large scale project. You can see it. As long as you are going to receive the presentation, I'm going to describe point by point. So let's go ahead. About our vision in the Colombian market. Okay. As I said before, it's going to be a a little bit of subjective impression. All the figures, you have it in the presentation of John and Max. So I'm going to give you our opinion and the lesson that we have learned from the point of view of an international company doing business or developing business in a market like Colombia. Okay, from us, we consider Colombia like a niche market up to now, but we are sure that it's going to be a core market in Latin area. So it's a PV emerging market nowadays for us, but it's we are sure that it has a great long-term potential. One very important thing for this country is that all kind of PV solutions are needed. As you have seen in the presentations before, this is a green market. Here you can develop from residential off-grid systems, medium-sized or large-scale off-grid systems, PV diesel systems in the non-interconnected zones, to self-consumption or large-scale projects in the interconnection in the connection zone. So all kind of PV solutions are needed, and also PV experts are needed, or PV expertise, international expertise are needed. So it's a good moment for all of us in the PV market to join efforts and develop business here in Colombia. You have to take into account also that it's a low-risk country in the area. You can see when you see the map, you can see mainly Panama, Costa Rica, and Colombia like the low-risk countries. The rest of countries are a little bit more difficult than these three countries. So from the international perspective, from the banks, from the investors, international investors, and so on, it's as you know, it's not only important the figures, the payback and the tier and so on. It's only important the risk that you can see in the country. So this is nowadays a good country to work and to start and to develop business. And from IBC, we are present here since. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, sorry. I thought you were finishing. Go ahead.
Just 1 minute. We are present here since 2013. The way that we develop business is through local partners. We look for strong and reliable long-term relationships with our partners. Nowadays, here in Colombia, we are mainly working with three partners. Colombian Best is one of them. Enel and Sojos are the main three partners that we are working here. We already have project references here, from a project in the Guajira in Nazaret to the project in Grupo Energía Bogotá that we have developed with Colombian Best. And very important is the knowledge of the market. My recommendation for the people that is thinking to get into the PV market in Colombia is to understand and to have a good market analysis of Colombia, because it's a very complex country, as you know. So it's very important to understand and to know all the issues here very well. And we can offer here global PV solutions, everything that it's needed here in Colombia. So the last I wanted to show you is one of the main reference that we have here in Colombia is the project that I've mentioned, the project in Nazaret in Colombia. It's an hybrid diesel system for supply energy for two villages, Puerto Estrella and Nazaret. It was installed by the consortium Enel Suel, and we were working together with Enel to develop the solution and supply all the projects. So that's all.
Thank you very much.
And here again.
Exactly. No, thank you very much, Alberto. Also to Mark. Because of the time, I'm going directly to the next and last speaker, Ignacio. Thanks again, guys. And I want to introduce now Ignacio Fernandez Stearns from IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank. They have a strong presence all over Latin America, and they're well known. And they're probably the first DFI looking into Colombia to finance solar. So it is a partner of the event with support in both Colombia and Panama. And today, Ignacio is going to give a brief perspective on financing solar in Colombia. Ignacio, are you with us?
Yes, hi, Tom. Thanks for the introduction. I will go ahead and pull up my presentation.
Perfect.
To briefly give all of you our perspective at IDB and what we're seeing in Colombia. So given the limited time, I will very quickly just introduce the IDB. Like Tom mentioned, we're the largest multilateral finance provider of finance in the region. Over the last few years, we have lent over $4 billion for a total of $12 billion in investments for climate change, including renewable energy projects, many of which were first of its kind and in places such as Chile, Uruguay, Peru, Honduras. And really our expertise covers project financing for infrastructure projects, corporate lending for industrials and service companies, lending to financial intermediaries and local banks, investments in social infrastructure, and loan syndications. So as some of the other speakers have alluded in their presentations, the role of the IDB as a multilateral development bank, it starts much earlier on in the process of of how a market develops. And we begin through the public sector of the IDB, working directly with governments to establish the right enabling environment for renewable energy and clean energy. And we also manage donor funds that can be used for grant funding, for feasibility studies, and pilot projects, as well as concessional finance to overcome some of the cost and risk barriers when we first enter a market. And obviously the bulk of it is going to be in the direct loans from IDB in the form of long-term debt. And finally, as we're seeing in many of these markets, to attract private capital and also local commercial bank lending as the market develops. So on the left, you can see some of the barriers that we encounter for private sector investment in clean energy. As I think John alluded to earlier, informational barriers are quite important and significant in a lot of these markets, and there's lack of information, lack of confidence in what the projections say, and a lot of times this requires a significant amount of analysis and feasibility studies to prove feasibility and to attract private financing. Sorry. And that's also the biggest barrier is also the lack of financing. And in a lot of these markets, as they start to develop, at first there will be all equity projects where a well-established group sort of takes a leap and starts to invest in the technology. There's also involvement from multilaterals, national development banks, regional development banks, as well as what we're seeing in the case of IBC Solar, for example, where we have international players who are trying to establish a presence in the market, and they have both the developer role and EPC role, and they have sort of a first mover role in some of these markets. Another barrier is the high transaction costs for some of these smaller projects at the lower end of the scale. The project finance transaction costs do not scale down very well. You still have very high legal fees, and the engineering costs and feasibility costs are fairly high relative to the total project value, as well as some of the other traditional risks that have to be evaluated, including resource risk, off-taker creditworthiness, EPC track record, and supplier risk. And on the right, very quickly, you can see a lot of the tools, financial tools, and that we use at the IDB together with our donor partners to try to overcome some of these barriers, and include some of the products I mentioned, which is technical assistance for feasibility studies, concessional loans, guarantees to financial intermediaries, as well as direct lending to corporates and projects. And so one particular product I wanted to highlight is the Climate and Clean Energy Facility that we have established. It's a $100 million financing facility for climate mitigation and adaptation projects. And we believe that this particular product is well tailored to the opportunities that we believe exist currently in the Colombian market, and as John and Mark and Alberto have pointed out. And so this facility is tailored for some of the smaller projects that are for self-consumption, renewable energy at the commercial and industrial scale. And we typically also include energy efficiency investments as part of the financing package. And as was the case, for example, with Grupo Éxito in Colombia, I believe they also included both energy efficiency and renewables to not only have lower cost energy, but also lower consumption overall. The financing is available throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also have first loss guarantees available in the focus countries of the facility. And these guarantees are backed by the Nordic Development Fund and the Climate Investment Fund. Some of the parameters of the facility, just to give you an idea of how it's structured and some of the dimensions of the transactions. IDB provides long-term debt for up to 50% of total project costs, and we also manage other donor funds here internally that we can combine with this financing, depending on the leverage that the project can support. And we use both the first loss guarantees and the concessional lending to mitigate some of the risk from these first-of-kind projects that we're seeing. And this I already mentioned as part of the facility. We also have dedicated funds that we can use to reduce transaction costs and share some of the feasibility studies costs and legal fees. One quick example of a project under this facility is the 3 megawatt solar project in San Pedro Sula in Honduras. This is a great example of where you have an industrial company with large energy consumption. In Honduras, the net metering regulation has not been fully defined yet. So there's some analogy to what's going on in Colombia, except the delays have been much longer in Honduras. And yet, this is a group that was able to invest up to $10 million in this project that includes both the 3 megawatts of solar as well as energy efficiency. And the IEB provided, the long-term debt at concessional terms for this project. We applied a partial credit risk guarantee to mitigate some of the risk, and provided technical assistance to identify energy efficiency measures and feasibility. And the one key point about this project is that it has a very important demonstration effect in a medium-sized industrial city like San Pedro Sula. A lot of the other end users take notice when they see something like this, and they start to become more confident about the technology and about the savings. So last, I wanted to quickly end on some of our perspective of Colombia. A lot of what has been mentioned has been great information and in line with what we're seeing. But the main point is that we do have these products that are tailored to the opportunities that we're seeing in this nascent solar market in Colombia. Colombia has a very attractive country profile. The macro fundamentals are all there. The ease of doing business relative to some of the other countries that we've been doing these projects in Central America. It's higher, more stable credit rating, on the lower end of the investment grade. So the potential is obviously there. It's attractive. And so for now, our financing under our facility, we're focusing on the distributed generation end for self-consumption of these very energy-intensive firms in the commercial tariff, as well as being really interested in hybrid solutions in the non-interconnected zones, as has been mentioned. And a quick analogy to that is, you look at the very mature solar market like Chile, and where in the beginning the projects were developed in the north with, even though it's connected to the system is not as reliable, but most of these large projects started to develop in the north to serve the mining sector and these less connected areas. So as has been pointed out, there are some key issues that have to be clarified with the regulation of the law. The tax incentives are very significant, as it has been pointed out by Mark and John. Once these incentives are defined, that's going to have a very positive impact in the short to medium term to improve the returns. And we've seen the impact of tax credits in the U.S., for example, with even a 30% investment tax credit, how the whole tax equity industry developed. So we think that once that is defined in Colombia, that's going to have a great impact. And so in the meantime, we're focusing on those segments of the market that I pointed out, and we have the technical assistance to support and move potential projects from the pre-feasibility stage toward bankability. And so we're working with international players who are entering the market, and with corporates and projects that are developing in the country. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ignacio. Is there a quick question to you? Is there a perspective to do a project already in the coming 12 months financed by IDB?
We're in conversations with companies, with local companies right now. As I mentioned, we're more in the stage of supporting the feasibility studies, and there are very distinct opportunities in the segments that I mentioned, for self-supply, but there's a lot of things that have to be right. Having the right consumption and being in the right area, having in the future we'll be having the taxable income to benefit from the incentives, and so right now we're trying to overcome some of the informational barriers, trying to help international players come in and try to attract other financing. So that's where we are currently.
Thank you very much again, Ignacio. I have a brief question to Mark. Mark, are you still there? Actually, we are wrapping up the session, and in a couple of minutes we will finish up.
Sure.
Mark, I had a question after your speech. Is net metering done on a monthly basis, or what is the basis that it's been done on?
Well, currently there is still no regulation. Let's say there's no clear regulation on that. We all hope that it will be a net metering, but as so far what we're doing is we always dimension our systems to not have any surplus energy, especially because we don't know whether the credits that we are talking about will be a net metering, a net billing, or what will be the final, let's say, the final remuneration for that.
John, are you still with us as well?
I am.
What will be your guess? Do you expect in the next month or 2 months that the regulation is really to be implemented? Is there any insight you can give on that?
Not much more than what I said. Again, the regulation is on the desks of government officials and is supposedly ready to be signed, but the expectation was that was going to happen in May, and here we are in July. So I think that the point is that we're close. I think one thing to point out is that once the regulation is approved, both UPME and the Ministry of Environment need to work on their internal procedures. So then that will take some time to finalize. So hopefully we'll have something in place before the end of the year, and I would say before the November conference and trade mission. One thing that I just wanted to go back to the question, because I think I misunderstood what was asked, and I'm not sure if the person is still on the line. But the 20 megawatt limitation is with respect to if you're selling excess capacity into the system. What the laws require is that you team up with either a retailer or a generator for those purposes. So if you're selling less than 20 megawatts, there's no restriction. And it has no bearing on your PPA. You can sign a PPA with whomever for as large as you want. The restriction is with respect to the excess sales of the 20 megawatts.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, and with that, I think I want to wrap it up. Thanks again to all the speakers. Thanks also to the audience. I wanted to highlight that I'm going to be there in Bogota and Panama in the coming weeks. So if some of you might be around, happy to meet. Also happy to schedule a call if you want to have more information, a trade mission or any thing related to this event or the webinar. Any questions can be that you still might have can be directed to me or to the speakers directly if you noted down their email addresses. We'll make available the presentations. There will be also recordings so you can look back this session. And well, I hope to meet a good bunch of you guys in November during the event, either in Panama or in Bogota or both. Thanks again for joining. You can contact me via this aspect. There will be a poll question coming up now where you can basically rate the webinar. So one more time, thank you, and we hope to